Hello and welcome to Being Black in Britain, the podcast that captures the nature and the essence of the Black experience across the UK. My name's Chiedza and I am your host. I'm also the co-founder and director of the RARA Education Project, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today recording at the Liverpool Podcast Studios. Today we are joined by an inspiring guest, Jen Harris, an award-winning Criminology PhD Researcher with key interests in matters concerning policing and race relations. With almost a decade of experience working and volunteering across the criminal justice system, Jen is also the founder of the Crimi-Talk and the Black Criminology Network. In this episode, we'll discuss Jen's career journey, her achievements, and her contributions towards the study of criminology in the UK. So thank you, Jen, for being our first guest on Being Black in Britain. The first question then I have to ask you, Jen, is why two organisations? Why did you have to found the Crimi-Talk and the Black Criminology Network? What's the difference?
So it wasn't a case of, firstly, thank you for having me. And secondly, it wasn't a case of just having two organisations. I didn't wake up and say, I want two separate entities. I want one just for Black people and one just for everyone else. So ironically, the Crimi-Talk came first.
Okay.
And I launched that back in 2016. And the rationale behind that was I was doing my master's degree and I identified a little bit, I don't want to say a gap, but there was an opportunity to engage with other people in criminology and just bridge that gap between understanding what I'm learning in academia and how then to translate that to, just general everyday I was going to say lexicon, but here we go, the irony of that. Everyday vocabulary. So that's where it essentially stemmed from. And then we started to run a few initiatives off the back of that. And it's still going now, not as prevalent as it once was, but it's still going now. We support students, individuals, just everyday individuals in understanding criminology and theories and just concepts. So that was that back in 2016. And then we fast forward to 2020 when I found out I was starting my PhD.
Right.
So it was all exciting. And then after the dust settled a little bit and, the family were really excited and it was like, oh my God, the reality set in. I remember sitting in my house and I was just like, oh my God, in a few months' time, I'm going to start my PhD. Where do I actually begin? I don't have anyone. I'm first gen PhD, so there's no one else in my direct space that had done one for me to ask questions. And I thought, right, okay, I need to go out and find a little bit of a tribe, so to speak, especially having been through the academic experience and doing other qualifications. There is also that cultural competency that's required. So yes, there are, groups out there that support everyone. But I knew in that moment I needed something that was a little bit more bespoke. So I went out, looked for it, couldn't find what I was looking for. So I thought, right, I'm going to start it. And, a Twitter post blew up into what it is now. So we do run events, etc., and support individuals, help people with applications, and an array of other things. So as I said, it wasn't just a case of having these two entities. I've kind of given myself a rod from my own back because now I have two organisations to run. There's so many people that I want to help. But thankfully, we've got a team for each of them and stuff like that. So
Brilliant.
That's the origins behind both of them.
And am I right in assuming then you are running these with teams? Are you running this single-handedly? What does that look like?
So I'm the founder of both.
Okay.
So to a certain extent, I obviously have oversight and the legal responsibility to make sure as community interest companies, they run properly. But I do have two voluntary teams on both teams. Both organisations have voluntary teams, very small, and they do amazing jobs. They all have their own journeys. They're all, doing different things in and around criminology themselves, or not necessarily criminology, but, broader subjects. We've got some people on the Crimi-Talk that have got psychology degrees, law degrees, people that are on the Black Criminology Network that are practitioners that are doing just a lot of research in different areas. So I have got two small groups, that keep them driving and stuff like that. So it's not just me.
Okay, that makes sense. But my question then is why criminology? Why not nursing? Why not education?
It's a really good question. Growing up, actually, for my own sins, I wanted to be a cardiovascular surgeon.
Okay.
And that fell away. That kind of passion fell away, and I started to grow interested in understanding crime. This is just a really roundabout, a short way of explaining it, but I became very interested in understanding crime and, growing up in the city of Birmingham and trying to understand why some people committed crimes or why some people didn't, why some people misbehaved at school and why some people that did misbehave at school ended up getting, put in, not pupil referral, that's not the right phrase, isolation. And then why some of the students didn't. So I was always quite inquisitive. And it wasn't until I'd done my A-levels and I'd done a module in my sociology A-levels, I'd done a module on crime, deviance and society. And I loved it so much. It was so interesting. Ironically now, with, having years on, there are a lot of things and theories that need to be debunked and stuff.
Of course.
But at the time, it was really interesting, 15, 16-year-old me at the time, 16, 17. I was really interested in it, and I, when it came to the day to, decide what I wanted to do for my degree, I decided to scrap what I was going to do, which was actually English at the time. I was going to go to uni and do English because I quite enjoy that subject as well, English literature. And I just decided on a whim, behind my parents' back, to go through clearing. I asked my head of year at the time, head of year 12, I said, can I just go through clearing? She's like, are you sure? I was like, no, but I'm going to do it. And I went off and got a degree in sociology. And
how did your parents respond to that when they found out? Did they feel betrayed?
Well, I remember my mum wasn't happy. So I come from a Caribbean household, so you can imagine. Yeah. But so my mum wasn't best pleased. Growing up, like I said, I've always wanted to be a cardiovascular surgeon. To go behind their back and submit my UCAS in sixth form and not apply for any medical degrees was one thing, and then two, to then decide that I'm not even going to go for what I've applied for. I'm going to go for something completely different based on one module out of the millions I did at my A-levels. So she wasn't best pleased when I called her and I says, you never guess what, I've got into uni. Oh, yeah, man, great. But I'm going to go and study something. So that wasn't great, but at the end of the day, it's all gone full circle. My mum's really proud. Before my dad passed away, was exceptionally proud of the journey that I was going into. So it's worked, and I've had to make it work because one thing I thought, I can't let them down. Of
course. I think what's really interesting there, from your introduction and from what you're saying here about the role of family and even the heart behind establishing these organisations, the key need there is that social support.
Yeah.
And I think that over the last couple of years, that seems to be the heart behind a lot of our organisations that have been established, especially sort of post George Floyd, around sort of 2020. There was a need to create a support system around ourselves because the resource wasn't there, the support wasn't there. And I say it as myself, as a researcher, as an academic, there was so much support that I couldn't have made it to this point in time without that network. Yeah. So it's really interesting that you say that. And how would you describe sort of the social support around you now? Yes, you've built your own, but do you feel sufficiently supported to engage in this body of work, to keep pursuing this work in the research world specifically?
Yeah, so just to add on to your point, I think it's really important, and where there is a gap and, where marginalised, and not necessarily just marginalised communities, but people that are mainly marginalised and they identify they do need that support. Yeah. If there's something that's not out there, just if you've got the capacity, build it, because there are probably other people that feel the way you do. And, there's a benefit of it, you have your space, but then you can then go back into mainstream spaces and function. But yeah, so in relation to do I feel that I've got social support? It's interesting, like I said, building my tribe was relatively important moving into the PhD space because I knew it was, completely different to my master's, and I'm getting older and there are a lot of other responsibilities that I have now. So yes, I do have the support, and it comes in different forms. It comes in, and I think that's another thing, is acknowledging the types of support you have and where they best fit. Not every piece of support is necessary for every element of your life, and I try my best to compartmentalize everything, because at the end of the day, I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman, I am, I've got the organisations where I need to pour into other people, but in order to pour into other people, I need to make sure that my support network's okay. My family, my friends, my people I've worked with, and maintaining professional relationships as well are really important. And, external organizations like yourselves, even though you're doing what you're doing where you are, I always know that professionally I can reach out to you and organizations on the periphery as well. So for me, I'm definitely in a place where I have enough support. You can always have more, but it's not just about, like I say, professional, family, friends. There's also that emotional element I think is really, really, really important, because life will get you down. Things will get you down. And so, I make sure that I try and pour into that as well. I've got a space where when I feel like I may potentially be depleted mentally or emotionally, there's somewhere I can go, and I've got a means to sort that out and get support where I need to. So
can we zoom in on that actually, in terms of sort of the mental health side of things? How would you describe the way that you manage your well-being, your mental health, especially thinking, so if you started 2020, you started doing your PhD in the thick of a lot of social and economic unrest, chaos. And yes, we're post-pandemic right now, but how have you managed your health and well-being in the midst of building your own thing, in the midst of starting this brand new research project and building this network? How has that been for you?
Difficult. And, I don't like to sugarcoat things. I like to be as transparent as possible. It's been really difficult in that, elements of resistance, from people, or people that fail to understand some of the vision. And that's okay. Not everyone's going to understand things that you're doing or the rationale behind it, or the potential impact you'd like to portray. But it has been tough. Starting during the pandemic was difficult. It was just, everyone was emotionally depleted, and still some people are still, within that hangover phase of the pandemic. And just, it was tough. And how I overcame it, I'm going to be honest, like I said, I mentioned before about like the support networks that I have, but also with internally, like being honest with myself. And it's something that I probably wouldn't say I did maybe towards the beginning of the PhD, but being a lot more honest with myself. If I can't write today, I'm not going to write. If I don't want to read today, I'm not going to read. Like the PhD will get done. What my potential impact or what I'd like to do for society will hopefully get done. But it's that ease of, making sure I'm not putting too much pressure on myself and, living, you have one life, So it was really difficult at the time. There was just a lot going on. It was, from a research point of view, it was really beneficial because a lot of research was, there's a lot out there anyway, but a lot of people decided that they wanted to write about it. Not everyone should have, but that's another story for another day.
It's not for everybody.
But a lot of people were writing about it. There was a lot of material out there, but then that does have its knock-on effect because there's a lot more that I have to absorb and, and then, also individual lived experiences as well. Taking that into account was quite difficult. So, so it was tough, bittersweet. But like I said, if it wasn't for that bittersweet and, the horrible circumstances that underpin it are really unfortunate. And, I take my hat off to anyone that's still here and persevering. But for me, it was just a case of being honest with myself throughout that journey now and thinking like sometimes slow down, sometimes stop. This is too much. You can't read that today. Is that beyond your emotional capacity? And stuff like that. So
I think sometimes we're quite heavily influenced by that hustle culture that says, you need to work hard. I'm up early at 5 a.m. I work X number of hours a day. This is my output. And I think getting caught up in that is just so toxic.
It is, but
because we can't keep up.
No, but it is. But it's like, to a certain extent, culturally, that's what's ingrained in us, isn't it? You have to work twice as hard. You have to work twice as hard,
Literally.
And oh my God, my patois is so bad. My mom's going to watch this and she's going to be like,
what are you doing?
Jen, shut up.
What are you actually doing?
But no, like, that hustle mentality is unfortunately ingrained in our culture and in our psyche. And, for the most part anyway, not everybody lives that. But and it's when you really sit down and think about it, it is a horrible, I want, I don't necessarily know if it's all the way soft life that I want, but I know I want to be as near as possible.
I'm not going to lie, I want a soft life, Jen. I'm ready for the soft life because, can you see my eyes are red? Can you see my eyes are red? Like, I don't sleep. Like sometimes I realize I just don't sleep well because I'm so caught up in getting stuff done. It's the deadlines. There's a speaking engagement. There's an event. There's a paper that needs to be put in, and it's just like sometimes it just feels like it never finishes. It never ends.
Yeah, but sometimes you just have to say no, and that's one thing. Like now, I'm starting to realize and acknowledge. Like, it's okay to say no.
It really is.
So yeah.
It really is. But looking at your research then in terms of the nature of the topic you're exploring, what are you finding are the present most pressing issues socially, especially in aspects of policing and their relationship with the Black community? What is kind of a red flag area of concern right now?
There's so many.
I know. Just itemise maybe top 3 things that come to the forefront.
It's interesting. So like my research, obviously I've got my research, but I do try and read beyond my research and just to get a bit more of a holistic and contextual understanding of what's going on out in the world. But one thing for me, when I first started, I remember starting off on what's currently known, what's the main thing that you know, and a lot of the things that come out are, your the unfortunate case surrounding Stephen Lawrence's death. You read a lot about that as historically, the 2011 riots. You often hear a lot about. There's a lot of research out there about the prominent things, but for me, one thing I'm starting to acknowledge and really, I don't want to say appreciating, but really trying to put at the forefront of my research is in regards to, race and policing, is that the absence and the invisibility of Black women. And which is really, part of me feels really, can I swear?
Be free, man.
Yeah, part of me feels really shit in that I didn't pick up on it to the extent I have now at the beginning of my PhD journey, because when you consider, violence against women and girls and like the domestic abuse and the lack of reporting and the lack of support that Black women have around them, amongst many other issues. So that's probably one prevalent thing. Knife crime is a thing that's often spoken about, and that's really up there. But one other thing that I'm acknowledging in my research is that lack of cultural competency between, that police have towards Black communities. And, there are elements of work. I really do try and keep my ear out on what's going on nationally and to a certain extent internationally. And I am seeing bodies of work, whether it be, in their best interests or not, or, whatever the intentions are, but I am seeing stuff. But like for me, like when I see some of these things, I do think have communities been consulted? Is this in the best interest? Have intersectional approaches been considered? Have the real nuances been touched on? Because otherwise initiatives are a waste of time. But yeah, so for me, I'd probably say that at the moment, like that, what's really up there and what's really alarming is the invisibility of, Black women and their experiences and, engagements with police.
What do you think can be done to respond to that then, to address that?
There are a lot of community initiatives out there. There are a lot. And I'd probably say if, people can start pouring into them, supporting these organisations. I'm not going to promote any because that's not what I'm here for, but pouring into a lot of these community organisations that are actively doing the groundwork and trying to support people. And also not just having that dependent on these community organisations, because while they're great, there is an element of power dynamics which seep into every element of society. But just making sure that those that are in, positions of power are utilising, research that's coming through community organisations to do the right thing and support, where there are pitfalls.
Indeed.
So.
Okay. And then thinking forward then, so right now you're doing your research. Yes, we've got the Crimi-Talk. Yes, we've got the Black Criminology Network. Where is all this going? So the next couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, what are you seeing in terms of the direction of your entire body of work?
That's a really good question. And I ponder on this a lot because not many people understand what I do and why I do. Some people think, oh my God, you're just wasting time. But for me, like I've always had a passion of helping people because, like I mentioned before, a lot of the things that I've launched are off the back of, my own experiences or things that I've observed. God, I can't talk, sorry. But either things that I've observed or, that deficit where people do need support. So for me, if I can continue my life and, make a legacy, not even necessarily make a legacy, but if I can continue my life supporting people in in the avenues that I know how to, that would be great. So for the Crimi-Talk, if we can get to a position where we can just continue as business as usual, just supporting students, individuals that want to understand criminology. You know, there's always, especially now, there's always a podcast, there's always a documentary, there's always something coming out, and there's always an opportunity to translate those things in and understand some of the theoretical underpinnings. So being that conduit between, you know, education and real life. So, you know, but for the Black Criminology Network is continuing to have that platform for, you know, Black criminologists or those that want to support Black criminologists. You know, and if I can continue doing both of those for the rest of my days, and in relation to my PhD, you know, utilising, you know, the skills or the knowledge that I've acquired for the betterment of, you know, that those issues between policing and Black communities, you know. So that's it for me. So the overarching thing is I just want to help. And, you know, if I always say, if I die tomorrow, did I do enough? Did I, you know, and touch wood, I don't die tomorrow. But yeah, if I do die tomorrow, I have life insurance. But please,
yeah, and I'm with that. And I think something about what you said there about legacy. It's a really interesting thing when we're trying to think about what we want to leave behind, how we want to be remembered. And sometimes we might not do anything particularly drastic, but you've sown a seed, haven't you? I remember being at a conference time and this guy said, we might not necessarily build a whole house, build a complete structure, but your body of work is at least a brick on that wall. That's part of that building process. Do you know what I mean? So we'll never really know the impact of our body of work.
Exactly. And as well, there are so many people that, you know, that have, along I done a talk a few months ago and I spoke about some of the people along the way, and I had to really sit down and think, you know, at this age, who influenced me? And it's sometimes indirect influences. You know, I remember reading a book by a Black author when I was in school. And when I think about some things that I do now in relation to the quality, the way in which I'd like to write and the quality of my writing, I think, why am I so hard on myself? You know, and I think, because I remember reading this book when I was like 12 or 13, and the quality of the writing was so good, you know, and I remember thinking, you know, I always want to make sure that I write well and, you know, it's absorbable and people can take it in. So like you say, it's those indirect influences and, you know, maybe one day I might have, you know, that'll be great if I do, but if I don't, then, you know, it is what it is, but I've done what I can, you know.
That's it. Last one then. So if you were to speak to 16-year-old you right now, in view of everything that you've seen, experienced, gone through, how would you advise yourself, encourage yourself wherever you were at age 16?
Oh God, that's a good question.
So that was like age 16. What are you in?
Because you're giving away my age.
No, I mean, like, what year are you in when you're 16? You're in like
year 11.
Year 11. You're doing your GCSEs then. So yeah, GCSE you.
I'd probably say don't worry. Like honestly, just don't worry. Like, enjoy your teen years. Yeah. It's ironic. I have a cousin. She's 15, turning 16. So you know, there are a lot of things that I try and, you know, pour into her. And, you know, just tell her, just enjoy life, you know, just young, because once those years, and this, oh my God, I sound like my mom. But honestly, once those years go, it's different. You can't claw them back. So I would just say, don't worry, have fun, you know, make friends. Don't worry about the friends that you have at the moment. If they don't like you, it's fine, you know, just find other friends, live life, find something and just enjoy it, live.
Absolutely. And for those that are listening now, if anyone wants to look you up, see what you're doing, find your organisations, where can they go?
So obviously the Crimi-Talk, you can Google us. The Black Criminology Network, you can Google us. We're on social media. We are absolutely everywhere. I say everywhere for the most part. We're on a majority of platforms. The Crimi-Talk does have a podcast, so you can also look for us on streaming services. The Black Criminology Network, again, just search us. And myself, you can find me on social media, and it's Criminologen. So that's CRIMINOLOGEN. Yes. So Criminologen. I actually spelled it right this time. But yeah, I'm sure the details will be under this photo. I can send them over to video. I can send them to you. But yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, Jen, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode with Jen. If you want to learn a bit more about her work, you can visit the Crimi-Talk or the Black Criminology Network. The links will be embedded in the caption below. If you did enjoy this this episode, leave us a comment, a thought, maybe a question. If you're listening via YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, like and share this episode. Thank you again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you soon.